Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And, Bill, I think with everything going on in our country, and we did mention this in our last episode, I think it's time to have a discussion about truth and policing. And you know what? This is probably a really complex subject, one of the more complex ones we've discussed, because there are lots of facets to it and lots of perspectives around it. But I think we need to discuss that, don't you think?
We do. The biggest challenge has to do with, you follow where the money goes, like if, where, as one, former police chief said, is that they're expecting the cops to do too much, like if there is, a social service problem, they want the cops to do it. They want the dog catcher. There's a dog loose, call the cops. It's what is our resources when we call 911? Well, right now, is it a criminal thing? Is it a fire thing? Right? Or, is it this other thing?
Is it health? I mean, it's usually
health.
Either police, fire, or ambulance, isn't it?
Ambulance. Those are the three primary, right? Great. Well, what happens if something sits on the margin? A homeless person is walking in the middle of the street. Well, chances of that homeless person getting arrested if you send the cops, but you're not necessarily sending the fire person for sure, and because they're not on fire. And unless the person is lying in the street and injured, you're not sending the emergency, the health people, the EMTs and stuff. So
yeah, I would say it's on its face, it may very well be a traffic problem, which does fall under police, although it may be a mental health problem that should fall under health, but they don't generally send ambulances for mental health problems like that, do they?
No. So safety. So safety is the primary need, right?
Right.
And then the secondary need is protection. Okay, so if we take a look at what the expectations are is that we would like them to do things regarding safe, and we'd like them to do things regarding protect. All right, so those are two things. Well, is dealing with a homeless person a safety or protection thing on a scale of 1 to 10? It's kind of sitting around a 3.
Yeah, it's kind of low on the scale, isn't it? Of each of those.
So if I'm a politician and I'm going to get votes by saying tough on crime, and I get elected, I better get a bill that funds protect on crime. But what happens if that's beyond the scope of this person's skill set? It's like, to be dramatic about this, it's like hiring an engineer to be a social worker. Would you ever hire an engineer to be a social worker, Tom?
No, I would not.
They don't have the people skills. Mm-mm. It's not on their resume. They don't have a degree for it. It's not their thing.
Right.
Or, I don't know. Would you hire a banker to be a nurse?
Certainly not.
No. Different skill set, different mindset. Different strengths. And because this is a communication show, we look at social issues and try to say, how can we communicate about it safely? And when a message shows up called Defund Police Department, what does that really mean? Does it mean of the global get rid of narrative? Or does it mean the reallocation of funds and the redistribution that a police department has an entire division that does social service issues? That you do not send a police person, or if you do, the police person is sitting in the second position to the social service person that's knocking on the door.
Sure. And it's very interesting, Bill, that term defund police. I mean, that term truth has been purchased around that in the last week since it surfaced in the wake of George Floyd in so many different ways, because it occurred to me, and this is just my observation, my perspective, is that the first people that, coined that phrase had the intention of not abolishing police departments nationwide or even in their city, wherever they were first talking about it, but it was more of a, let's take some of the funds that are going to policing and move those funds to more different things that are going to help support the community and prevent crime, so police won't need to do some of the things they're doing now. I mean, that's sort of how I viewed it, as more of a community support as a means to deter and prevent the need for police in some situations. But then, of course, everyone say, defund the police. You gotta have police. Well, although now I think there are some extreme people who are talking literally about abolishing police departments. So everybody's come out of the woodwork on this term.
Well, depending on a person's mindset about the police, have they had a benign experience with them? Or do they have a violent experience of them? Well, if they have a violent experience, then police are going to show up to them as somebody that's going to terrify them.
Right.
And they're going to go like, let's get rid of this group because I've been traumatized by this group. Instead of what we're doing is we're applying a adult mindset to this, which is, what's the proportion to this? Like, when your kid spills milk, you don't, take away their privileges for 2 weeks and stick them in the closet. Just saying, the proportionality is problematic. Well, that's one of the things that the police departments are, and the whole industrial complex that's built around the legal system, that here's what the rule is. Felony means stealing. And if you steal a candy bar and it happens to be your third strike, that's 25 to life. That's what the voters voted for. Well, the voters are voting for their need for safety to be met. And they're hoping that the smart people will go like, well, this is what they voted for, but this is not what's really practical for society. And guess what? People go like, no, it is the letter of the law. There is no variation in this. And I need to build another prison in order to deal with what you just voted for. A prison bond, whatever the thing on the ballot is.
Right. The money to pay for it, sure. And of course, that adds a whole nother layer of complexity that I don't want to go down that rabbit hole today, Bill, but the entire private prison industry that exists because of the vast number of people that America has incarcerated.
Well, we're exasperated as human beings and as the animal body that we're in, because our limbic brain goes after safety and protection. It creates a story of fear. It creates a story of the need for protection. all you got to do is see an image, and then you're going like, well, we need to create a story of protection. It's one of the reasons why during wartime nowadays, they are very careful about any images of war reaching the American public. Very, very cautious about that, because we don't want to we don't want the public to know, because then public sentiment will turn. When you see a village being burned in Vietnam, you're going like, what are we doing there to those people? And we're not those people.
And Bill, hasn't that happened here domestically with the death of George Floyd?
That's what's happened. That's literally what's happened. It is the image. There's 2 or 3 images that I have is from the Vietnam War that are just burned in my head. The little girl being burnt, after walking out of a village like this, her body's completely burned from a village being burned by napalm in Vietnam. It's like, yikes. Do I want that image in my head? No. Do I want the image of George Floyd losing his life the way he did? No. I don't want that image.
Right. Well, I mean, it certainly has raised awareness, as we say, right, for the brutal tactics that are happening in policing.
Brutal tactics, changes to the overcompensation for protection that's not proportional. It's not proportional. At $20 is not proportional to a guy getting his neck kneeled upon. So we're going to feel sad and helpless and overwhelmed about the level of violence we see because we're a human being like everybody else. The only challenge is that if the human being has been cultured to believe that here's a bunch of good people and here's a bunch of bad people, then I feel I want to be on the side of good people. So one of the things you and I talked about a little bit before we got on the show was the show Cops got canceled. Right?
Yes, absolutely. And that is a reaction to really a reaction to everything going on with all the protests in the United States about the treatment of people by the police, and disproportionately the treatment of African American people or people of color by the police. And it's very interesting because there is an article that we're going to have in the blog post for this episode at purchasingtruth.com or billstierle.com. And it says, so it was first canceled in 2013 by Fox. It was on Fox for many, many years, I think starting in 1989.
Yes.
And the reason that Fox canceled it a couple years ago was that they argued that although Cops was marketed as unbiased, the show offers a highly filtered version of crime and the criminal justice system where the police are always competent crime-solving heroes and the bad boys always get caught. And so they canceled it back then. And then, of course, another cable network, the Paramount TV network, picked it up. But now they're the ones who have announced they're canceling it. It was going to start on June 15th, and now it's done.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they're going to get many advertisers at this point wanting to advertise on a show that shows, the police are always the heroes and the bad guys always get caught. That's not really in alignment with the sentiment of most Americans today, is it?
Yeah. At this moment, there's I'm not sure any brand would align itself with that thing, and how many, yeah. And how many people can you get to show up for that? As police have said, is that show for all the number of years it was on Fox was a great recruiting tool. Hey, you want to be one of the good guys? Come join us. Hey, you want to fight for good? Great, show us. Well, the person that's coming in that's being recruited is a person that might have experiences of helplessness, might have experience of being on the struggle of, power over experiences from their past. Maybe it's not I mean, there's a lot of folks that are there in the spot, and I would, go ahead and strive to say the majority of folks that are in law enforcement are doing pretty good. And this is not a bad apple conversation. This is how the belief structure of a person, both being the person that is to serve and protect, changes to serve and protect, looks like this version of serve and protect. And that's how truth gets purchased, Tom, is that this is the belief of what it looks like. We are sensitive people. Human beings are sensitive creatures. We are just so sensitive. All you got to do is put an image in, and if the image, it gets locked into long-term memory and it has an emotion to it, then this is wrong and this is right. Instead of saying, there's a variance here that's going on here between the wrong and the right of it. And I am not snowflaking this. I want to meet the need for safety and meet the need for protection for the cops. Their needs for safety needs to be met. But also, it's like I'm sending a person in that has a belief structure that sets them up to going like, well, these protesters are getting out of hand. I have a need for order that goes ahead of the need for serve and protect. The need for order is they're not following the curfew. Well, that doesn't mean that they need to, because if they do, they'll go home if they're following it. But if they don't, you're still there to serve and protect them. So if they're not doing anything that's a problem and they're breaking the curfew line, you're following the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law, which includes other needs. The letter of the law, everybody needs to be at home at 9 p.m. That's the letter of the law. But the spirit of the law is this person has a need to be heard and a need for justice, and they're not going to bed until sometime after midnight.
Well, so interesting, Bill. Let's go on this for a second. The letter of the law is what in the past we've always referred to in this show as black and white thinking, and that's not a racial term. That is literally, right or wrong. That's what that's meant to be. No gray area in your thinking. Right. It's either one way or the other way. And the spirit of the law, it gets a little murky. That is, if someone is to make a judgment or to, change their actions or behavior based on the spirit of the law, they're not that type of thinker. They are seeing beyond the absolute choice, the binary choice, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's they're having a range of and have the ability to discuss with somebody else to go and like, listen, I am not going home. And all of a sudden the police go like, well, how can we send a message to this crowd? Well, we'll arrest that guy and arrest that guy, and then the crowd will disperse. So they have a belief that, okay, I'm going to prosecute to the letter of the law. The only problem is that there's 100 more of them coming now that you've just done those two things, because temporarily you might have fixed something, but systematically you have not.
Well, and then they're not applying that standard evenly to all the people, perhaps, right?
They're not all of a sudden. Yep.
And I have to tell you, I am glad I am not a police officer. Can I tell you that? I mean, I can think there are few jobs like it where, I mean, their training and what they have to do out on the streets, I mean, it's so complex and to know where the line is. Like if I think about, all right, where do you draw the line to draw your gun to meet your own need for safety and protection versus, taking action that's going to have respect for the people's need for safety and protection. And it's not an easy job. There's no way it's an easy job being a police officer, because I don't know how they're trained. So I'm going to put that out there right now. I do not have perspective on that, but my impression is they're not as heavily trained in empathy and compassion as they are in preservation of their own life in certain situations. And, one little example, and I know, Bill, we talked about it before we started today, that I just think it's worth bringing up, is that when police are trained to use their weapon, their gun, to protect themselves, they're not trained to shoot to disable.
So this is a really important thing to bring up, is that to shoot to disable and to shoot to, shoot to kill and that kind of thing. So it's I'm going to propose something that's even a little more disturbing this.
Okay.
It's to use force to manage emotion. Usually if you're arresting somebody, the person has a lot of emotion going on there, and to use a weapon to manage emotion, this is not a strong strategy. It's, you get somebody upset to manage emotions, you're going to use that, or use a threat. I've heard, hey, if you don't calm down, I'm going to take you to jail. Well, for a person that's very upset and all of a sudden you're going to do what? Oh yeah? No, you're not taking me to jail. Or to somebody that at least has a little bit more of an adult mind, or is not upset or doing that threat could be the thing that either gets them to calm down or throws them over the line. Because what winds up happening is the vibration of language is the thing that hijacks the truth. It's like, yes, that's a truth, but that's not the best intention, is for anybody to get arrested here or anybody to get shot here. Notice that there's not much room between those two things. You're either going to get arrested or you're going to get shot. But there's no, how can we manage our emotions here, and how can we get order and safety to show up? How can everybody get the protection that they need in this environment? How can we get that?
And that's complex, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's complex. And it's complex because you got a husband and wife, and they're pushing each other in the house, and one of them calls the police. They're pushing each other in the house. They're pushing each other, so they both got red marks on, right? Yeah. And the wife says, take him to jail. The husband says, take her to jail. And the police, what are they left with? Red mark evidence. And the police gets what they say. Well, we'll take you both to jail.
Sure. It's a no-win situation, really.
It's no-win situation. It's like, well, looks like neither of us want to go to jail. So guess what? Well, neither of us are going to go to jail. Maybe. Or, okay, let's take that out for a spin. Let's see how that one works. So it's the need for protection, the need for safety is, there's no training to deal with how to use language with emotion. I could say all kinds of derogatory things right now, and it'll piss people off. They will call me all kinds of names. They can, because all I got to do is put a phrase there, but it's how they're hearing it. even if I say it in the most benign way, it don't matter. I don't have any control about how their brain is getting activated here. And the police are in a no-win situation because they're got like, what do you say next? And when do you have to use force with this person to do this? It's like, hey, we need protection here. We need safety. Would you be willing to take 3 steps back? I mean, that is a compassionate way to ask somebody to do something. Listen, in order to get some safety and some space from this, would you be willing to take 3 steps backwards here? Here, you and I'll take 3 steps back. You take 3 steps back. Will that work for you? Immediately I'm going like, I've just made a request. I didn't say, sir, if you don't calm down, I'm going to take you to jail. Calm down. They're going to escalate.
Yeah.
So because the show. Yeah.
Have you ever heard a police officer speak that way, Bill?
Only the ones I've trained.
Okay, I didn't know that was the answer. Just so your listeners know that, I wasn't setting you up for that. That was a genuine question.
You didn't even know that I had experience there.
No.
And one of my greatest students, mentees, he's a probation officer, and he uses this material all the time, and his success rate is literally leads the department when he was working there before he retired. I mean, he was leading the space because he got all of his people to be compliant using language. Yeah. No threats, no hold the sword of Damocles over their head.
Well, there aren't, if I could say, there aren't enough Bill Stierles in the country to be able to retrain all the police officers to think and act a little differently. It seems that we have such a large system of law enforcement in this country, whether you like it or not, it's there. And there
so
are
wait
a
a minute,
lot
let's
of
pause on that last
to
sentence because you said there's not enough Bill Stierles. And I want to let you know, everybody out here that's listening to this at this moment, there are enough people. The only thing is that that's what the defunding means. It's reallocation of resources towards counselors, towards social services. There are enough of me. There's plenty of me out there. Now, there's not as many that has taken this stuff out for a spin the way I have and be able to, but there's enough with good thinking, to stare this thing down. There are expansive elements that could be added to a police department. The funds will just get reallocated in a different way. The police are not put in a position where they're going to get stuck in a place to use excessive violence. They're not going to. It's not even excessive violence. They're going to be in a place where the use of force appears to be necessary. Because if you have somebody that is struggling with drugs, you need a counselor there. You don't necessarily need a police officer there. And we got to we got to stop traumatizing our own population, our own society. We got to stop traumatizing ourselves, which is really where the through line is.
I mean, America would certainly be a much more pleasant place if we got to that place. I mean, it does seem, though, in the wake of George Floyd's death, what happens is a light gets shined so much on overzealous policing, excessive use of force, things that are way out of proportion in this case anyway, with the crime that was alleged of, forging $20 check or something along those lines. And then all the reaction is serving to do what? What have we seen? The action taken by most police departments or most states is they're outlawing chokeholds. They're outlawing, kneeling on people's necks and some of the actual physical acts that can so easily take a life. They're not really focusing on what you're suggesting, Bill.
That's right. They're not focusing on that. If there was something that, I would recommend Congress doing, is saying, here is well, I don't know if it would be called something, the Community Reinvestment Act. I think it would be more like the service, serve and protect,
or maybe compassionate policing. I don't know.
The
maybe
compassionate policing.
I don't know.
But it's really got to be built with. There's each department needs to have a team that really focuses on the bridge, the interpersonalizers, the people that are strong with emotional language, the people that can communicate their way through a conflict without taking a swing. It's literally, a team, depending on the size of the department, somewhere around, initially you start it with around 13 people, and you get those 13 people to start doing the things to build the relationships between the police and the population. I remember recently seeing a video or a picture of a police cooking hot dogs and doing it at a police community day on a block. And I can't remember what city was it, but here's this cop flipping burgers and serving burgers or hot dogs to people. That kind of money spend, if you want safety to be in the environment and cooperation to be in the environment, you don't want to stick the guy with a face shield and a baton while he's doing that. Well, now it's going to be a mask, and you don't want them to present as this stick could hurt me or this gun could hurt me. So we want to get the cooperation between our interpersonal relationship and this concept called safety and protection, and really kind of step into that. And I know that we can, there's a lot here to go into, but the main thing is that the expectations have to change for the police. And then the second part of it is that we need a different mindset and talent set to be available for the police, so they're not put in the circumstance and situation to do that. They're not. That's the thing that's going to make the biggest difference next.
Well, Bill, I think this is a good start. I think, there are many pieces to this, and I think we'll address some of these, what more might be sort of take some deeper dives into portions of it in the future. This is a hard subject to try to wrap your head around, but I appreciate where you shared with us today, Bill. I think
so. Next time, let's talk about the money, and let's talk about the politics of this, and how regrettably politicians over the years have fed the protection narrative and have fed that police are the answer for that, whether it's Democratic or Republican. I mean, the crime bill under Clinton really did some really horrific things to us, and it set us into the place. Why? Because if he didn't do it, his opponent was going to do it. So he just beat him to it. He beat him too, so he get reelected. Why? Because his opponent would say stuff on crime.
I think former President Bill Clinton has come out with some regret over that, I believe, looking back at what has happened over that. And I believe President Obama tried to undo some of that by giving commuting sentences of nonviolent drug offenders and things like that. So that's an interesting place to talk about going forward, is the politics and the money, and how that has had an impact on truth with regard to policing and criminal justice, right?
Yeah. Well, more to come on that, Tom. I think the nation is in a place where there can be some movement now around this issue. Okay.
I agree. Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth Podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.